Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And you can hear us live every Thursday evening on the Inception Radio Network. But if you miss an episode, go to the Just Energy Radio webpage or our YouTube page and sign up for our newsletter or subscribe to our YouTube channel or like us on Facebook, because we do have like a Just Energy Radio like page, on Facebook. They come up with all of this really weird stuff, and then you have to figure out how to communicate it to people so that it makes sense. But yeah, you can like Just Energy Radio on Facebook. Yeah, that. So let's just get going because I'm losing it here. And so in this hour, we're going to be speaking with Zohara Hieronimus about earth changes and the power of consciousness. But let me tell you a little bit about her and get her on the air. Okay. Zohara, we'll just skip that. Hieronimus is an award-winning radio broadcaster, author, social justice and environmental activist, and pioneer in holistic health care. With lifelong participation in the esoteric sciences, global economics, and leading-edge research, Zohara currently co-hosts 21st Century Radio, airing on WCBM 680 Baltimore. Her artwork has been featured in public shows, and her digital photography is archived online in various forms. So from ZoharaOnline.com, Zohara Hieronimus. Hey, Zohara, how are you?
Thank you for having me, Rita.
Well, we have a lot to talk about and not a lot of time.
All right.
Okay. But since I haven't ever had you on the show before, I always like to bring new guests in where they just kind of, give us a little introduction to who you are. What started you down this path, or how did you get to where you are now?
Well, I turned 60 this January, so I can't tell you all the markers on the road, but I can say that nearly drowning at 3 and being rescued by a spiritual being that only years later I discovered was the Blessed Mother of Roman Catholicism, the Jewish Mary that everybody worshipped. That was really the beginning for me. And then I had many other experiences that were one would call multidimensional. I had an engagement when I was young through an eye surgery. I experienced a past life when I was a nun taking care of an African sanctuary. And that was really, things like that started me off at a very young age, understanding that there was more than what my parents and my siblings said was all there was in the world. So it was an interesting life because I was also an athlete. I was very aggressive, very small. I'm still very petite. And it was an interesting sort of combination to recognize that I was super sensitive. I am a sensitive. I do animal communication. I delight in trans-species communication, meaning talking between different species. And I did that even as a child, but I thought it was my imagination. So when I would see gnomes or when I would experience an angel or when I would hear from the dead about somebody in my family circle, I wasn't always sure that it was real because I had no one to guide me. And so I think like many sensitives who can cover up their sensitivity, in my case, with very great athleticism and very great daringness, you don't really know what that inner life is and what it's for. And like most people, if we grew up in an indigenous culture, someone would have trained me long ago as a healer or a shaman or something would have been able to channel that in a very purposeful way. It took really getting almost deathly ill with Crohn's disease and having surgery when I experienced something else interesting that I had encountered in South America during that stage. And from then on, I really went forward. And in my own journey of self-healing, I experienced all the different kinds of holistic medicine, all the way from electromagnetics, color therapy. I visited with African healers and Hindu healers, and eventually set up, as a result of that journey for my own recovery, the Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center in Baltimore in 1984. So it was interesting for me that out of my own suffering and challenge of health, I was able, as we see in many nonprofit situations, out of a hardship comes a great service. So I founded America's oldest holistic health center, which is still in operation today. And that was sort of the beginning of my being able to live a kind of new paradigm lifestyle, which with my husband, who I've been with now 35 years, we together were able to, I guess, encourage each other and support each other in understanding that there's more to the world than the material sciences.
Well, okay. So this new book that you've written, The Future of the Human Experience, Visionary Thinkers on the Science of Consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm reading it across my desk and I don't have glasses on, so it's always like, well, I wouldn't a little bit of a challenge.
Glasses. Well, this book is really the result of, I'd say, 40 years of work, but 30 years of interview work. I've been a broadcaster. My first interview work was in 1975 when I found out about MIAs and POWs missing in action and the secret returnee program. And I was a mime at the time, so I wasn't even talking really, but I was invited into a Boulder radio program. And then years later, my husband got into radio and I had no interest in it, but eventually followed him in, then made a profession of it. And the future of human experience really examines all of the new paradigm, whether it's in biodynamic farming or robotics or quantum physics, consciousness studies. And what I've tried to do in this book is show through the lens of the human experience, the body of the world, the mind of the world, and the soul of the world. But ultimately, what this book does is it collaborates the Hindu teachings, the Veda teachings, the Kabbalistic teachings of the Hebrews, the Maya teachings, the indigenous peoples' teachings that says that consciousness is a field in which all life exists. So whether it's a plant or a dog or an elephant or a person, that there is a field in which we are all one. And I think, when we have experiences in our own life through our intuition, having hunches or thinking we know who's on the phone and it being them, or dreaming of a person and then they call us. These are all suggestions of the reality of this field in which all life is connected. So this book shows us that the power of human consciousness, our ability to want good for the earth, to want good for others, to do good for others, is really what makes us masterful co-creators. That we really are made in the image, as many traditions speak, of deity, meaning of the masterful universe, of the universe that's balanced and has purpose. And so in the purposeful universe, as Arthur Young said very early on back in 1976, and he was one of the Bell helicopter designers, he coined the term, the universe is reflexive. And that's the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. So this book shows that we have the ability as humans to shift everything that's happening on this earth through our attention, through our intention, and through what we do. That the world isn't just happening to us, we are happening to the world. So whether it's global earth changes, as many traditions have prophesied, we can lessen the devastation that is apparently on the horizon by the way we go about stewarding the earth, how we take care of the animal kingdom, how we treat each other, how we use our non-local consciousness. So it's a very great breadth of study, but it always is asking the same question that my dowsing teacher, the late Terry Edward Ross, would say, no matter what it is we're doing, whether it's going somewhere with someone or going to another planet in outer space, we should ask, may I, can I, and should I? Meaning anything we do, when you look at nature, nature has these incredible powers. There's solar energy, there's hydrothermal energy, there's nuclear energy, there's cold fusion energy, but there's also mind energy. And I think that we're on the precipice as a humanity of coming to appreciate that the power of the one mind, of which we are all members, like cells in a body, has the ability to shift everything that occurs on this planet. Meaning our thoughts actually draw from the immaterial vacuum and pull it towards materialization. And that's what quantum physics shows us, so that each one of us, it doesn't matter who we are, each one of us is here for a purpose, and we're all part of this incredible web of life that is ours to hold dearly. And so I think what I've shown is it doesn't matter whether you're a scientist or an astronaut or an author or a dancer or a farmer, that reverence is the cornerstone of well-being for each one of us and for the earth.
I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm following along, but I'm going to throw this one out. Based upon what I'm seeing, what's going on in the world and all the fighting and the discord that's going on, if we have this power of mind to create our future, what future really are we creating?
That's a really wonderful question, and I've interviewed prognosticators for the military, and John Peterson of the Arlington Institute as one example, as well as psychics and those who have done mass dreams of the future, like the late Helen Wambach and Chet Snow when they did work in the early 80s. And what they basically say is there are wild cards, Rita, and they say a wild card would be an example, a meteorite striking the Earth. That could really upend the civilization that we currently know. A wild card would be famine. In terms of the World Food Reserve, we only have a 7-day food reserve worldwide. And there's all sorts of reasons for it that are crazy and insipid and almost malevolent. But the truth is that there are things that we can't necessarily predict and we may not be able to avoid. But what I show, for instance, in the beginning of the book, The Future of Human Experience, is that time is cyclical. It's not linear. There have always been civilizations on this planet and others, like on Mars and elsewhere, who have risen and fallen. And whether it was an extraplanetary event like a meteorite or a galactic center explosion or some other phenomena in the universe, or it was something on their own planet, as some say the Atlantean civilization destroyed itself with their energy weapons. And we see this with our own nuclear energy and the capacity we have to destroy life. You think about all the thousands of years it takes to build these cities that you can destroy in a day. So I think when we look ahead, we see two things. We see either paradise or we see catastrophe. And I believe what history shows us when you look back through the Veda tradition as one example, which shows that we've been on this planet for about 2 billion years as human life forms in the form we currently know ourselves as, not as people that came from apes, but that we've always been here in this form, that history is cyclical, that we rise and we fall like a breath, like our own lives. We come into incarnation, then we leave incarnation. But what happens is that we don't disappear. And in the same way, these ancient civilizations don't disappear. So I know like last year and coming up to 2012, everybody was very excited about the Aztec calendar. But the Aztec calendar didn't end. It was just talking about the ending of a particular period of consciousness. And they say that now we're in the period called the sixth sun, when it's the flowering and the cross-fertilization of all traditions. So I think we all know from our own lives, we all say we're going to change how we eat, we're going to exercise. And how many of us don't do this until something happens to us and we have bad health? I used to joke, how many people pray to God every day? And most will say, I don't. How many people pray to God when they've had an accident or they're about to have one or they're trying to protect someone they love? So it seems that humanity can move towards a future that is positive, brings unity, brings harmony and bounty. And we can do it out of joy, or we're going to get pushed from behind, as they say in Kabbalah. And this is true in all our lives. Sometimes we'll say that revealed good, as an example, is when things are going well. We have a good job, we're making enough money to take care of our households, to do the things we want in our recreational time. And then all of a sudden we lose our job, and we will say that is horrible. But the Kabbalists would say that that's concealed good, meaning when bad things happen to us or things we term bad, though that's a judgment, like a broken arm or an illness, actually that provides an opportunity for the greatest good. So if we look at earth changes, which are being precipitated by human activity, but also because the earth has its own cycles of supporting life and then needing to go into rest, we would say that earth changes are bad. But in fact, I believe the silver lining, the concealed good of Earth changes, is it will bring humanity together. And so you might even look at terrorism that way. We know it's awful when people randomly take other people's lives that seems just so malevolent and so evil and selfish. But at the same time, it is bringing the world together. So I think that in our own lives, when we have challenges personally or locally or nationally or internationally, there is some concealed good in it if we're willing to look at it and search for it.
And one of the things that, I'm going to go back to the December 21st, 2012, because I think that it really kind of ties a lot of concepts together. There were all the people that were the, apocalyptic people, the world's going to end, it's going to blow up, we're going to be floating around in space, which would have been okay. And then there are the people that said things were going to transform. But I just, and I hate to sound so pessimistic about the whole thing, but I just don't get the impression that humanity, as we know it today, is going to be willing to give up the things that need to be given up in order to create this paradise on Earth, because, we would have to give up our microwaves or, ride a bike. I mean, there are these things that we would have to do, and it seems like we're too resistant to do that. And the only way to achieve this balance, or at least this idyllic balance, is to basically have the clock reset and us have the opportunity to do it over again.
Well, that's not happening. But what does happen, and that's why I like Amit Goswami and others I've interviewed who are quantum physicists, and they talk about quantum activism. When one person changes themselves and the things they decide to do, the world is changed by it. And while most of us don't feel that we've made that much of a difference in the world, changing the car we drive or recycling or buying organic food or signing a petition. Here's an example. We all know how deadly GMOs are. And also we know that Monsanto and the other corporations who lobby Congress and give them lots of money seem to get all kinds of protection and dollars for their deadly enterprise of GMOs. We know it causes infertility, sterility, cancer, early death, mortality, infant mortality, et cetera, in the animals that they've tested. And we know now from the human population that it's leading to a great deal of chronic illness in children and adults. So recently there was a petition there was a Monsanto Act rider in the upcoming Senate Finance bill, and they were going to have the protection that no state could label GMOs or test for their safety. Meaning they wanted carte blanche opportunity to basically destroy the world with GMO product, destroy the seed bank, destroy our agriculture, destroy our health, etc. There were just online petitions. I signed it. Hundreds of thousands of other people signed it. And I believe it was my own senator from Maryland, Barbara Mikulski, who pulled that out of the Senate Finance bill, and it's no longer in there. There's no longer a Monsanto Protection Act rider. Now, I can tell you, Rita, I was sure we wouldn't get that. I mean, I, like so many other activists, I've been an activist since I was 14. That's a long time of activism. I mean, we have won so many battles and then lost them the next year. I fought food irradiation, and I've been working against chemical pesticides and insecticides in food and agriculture and schools and hospitals since I was 16. And, it's even worse today than it was back then. So I think
that's the part that doesn't make any sense. It's like, we know this stuff is bad. They say, oh, well, you shouldn't feed your kid McDonald's. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. But then you go into the schools, and all they feed them is junk, and there's candy machines everywhere and soda machines. It's like...
But, that is changing. Like in New York City now, they have a whole nother food program. I think the truth is it takes committed individuals. And it doesn't have to be a lot of individuals, but it has to be committed people who stay the course. Just as we raise our children, we stay the course with our children. We stay with them their entire lifetimes. Doesn't matter how old they are, they're always our children. And I think that it's more about attitude than numbers. And we've been dissuaded in this country to feel that we have power. I think Ingo Swann, who created the protocols with others for the remote viewing program in the military, the Stargate program, and he used to say, there's such a thing as stealth power. And stealth power are things like non-local consciousness, being able to see at a distance, being able to heal at a distance, being able to affect the minds of others at a distance. So China and Israel and Russia, they train children to do this. And our government pretends they're still not using it, but they do in the military. They're very good psychic spies. So as Ingo said, you don't see any billboards advertising schools for power. But the truth is power comes from within. It isn't a sign from without. So there are people like in the Congress or in our state legislatures who have a certain kind of power, or corporations who buy their way into everything and control so much of the world. And they, the status quo, as they used to say, the status quo doesn't change until the old guard dies. Well, there's a new generation of kids with us, and they're working hard to make a difference. So I think it's about knowing that it's not about the outcome, because we all know in our life we can't control what happens. What we control is our intention. So if we intend good, as Gandhi said, when he lost faith, he always remembered that love and compassion always wins in the end. And it will, and it does. Now, we may not see the results we want in our lifetime, but that doesn't in any way diminish the importance of our doing the right things in our lifetime.
This is true, but it just seems like, there's what people will do as an individual, and then there's the whole corporate mentality, which... Yeah. No, it's a serious problem. It's a huge problem.
It's interesting because America, we have such a lame press. We have very little investigative reporting. We have very little diversity of opinion. You can turn on any network news and pick up any paper, and they're all telling you the same stories. And that's why I got involved in the media for full-time for a decade. And for instance, I covered the murder of Vincent Foster. It wasn't suicide. This was in the Clinton administration. I covered the federal murder of the Branch Davidians with warfare gas that was outlawed in warfare, but they used it on citizens of Waco, Texas. So I covered a lot of things. The mainstream media got totally swallowed whole by the government fax machine. And I think that the European press and the Scandinavian press, they laugh at our media. They laugh at Americans because we've all been brainwashed to think we're the best. We've got the best everything. We don't. We have horrendous infant mortality, horrendous death rates for women giving childbirth, and we don't have the best health care. And even with the new policies, we're not going to have the best health care because it's not really precedented on supporting life. It's a death economy. After years and years and years of covering foreign affairs and national affairs and local affairs, I discovered that what we live under in this country is a death economy. You see it in agriculture, spray, kill, disease. You see it in medicine, radiate, poison. Who in their right mind would want to radiate and poison their child in order to treat a disease when instead they could build the immune system and use other natural remedies that have been used for millennium on this planet successfully? But most people don't know, and so they're doing their best, and they think they're doing the best. So it's a lack of education, which is why I wrote this book, The Future of Human Experience, because in one book, I've given people an opportunity to see that we have so many solutions that are already vibrant and at work in the economy and at work around the world, just might not be in your neighborhood. But all of these things are available to us. And so a life economy would say you only do things that support life. We wouldn't be dropping bombs as some sort of humanitarian aid. That's what they say. It's humanitarian aid. We're going to bomb the bridge. Well, no, we would give money to the community. If we're going to spend those kinds of billions in war, give them the money to educate their girls. Give them the money to build schools. Give them the opportunity to have health care. One of the things that futurists are most concerned about, as are the military planners, is the division between the haves and the have-nots on this planet. Most of us live with electricity. Not everybody has the same economic wherewithal. But there are billions of people on this planet right now who don't have enough food. They don't have clean water. They don't have a place to live. We have millions and millions of people now who are on the run from either war, famine, or earth changes. And in the future, we're going to have billions of people moving on this planet. So I think it's just time that people stand up for life and say, let me ask this question. Is the choice I'm making going to support my life and the life of my family and the community and the world? Or is the choice I'm making something that in some way is destructive? And another barometer I have found after years and years of studying Kabbalah, which I wrote 2 books on, is that we can evaluate our own self and our own relationships with others by asking, is what I'm doing selfish or is what I'm doing selfless? Is what I want for others selfish or is it selfless? So I think, and then you can also evaluate your friends and your associations and your beliefs. And it's a really easy self-guide to guide ourselves into self-mastery, which from my judgment of experience this lifetime and many others is the purpose of incarnating. Each one of us is meant to come into self-mastery. And that's what all the esoteric traditions teach, which is to refine ourselves so that we can be of greater service. Because ultimately, it's about being of service to each other and the world. And every thought we have is a real entity. It's not just a thought. So when we think or say something poorly about somebody else, it doesn't just affect them. It affects the person who thought it and said it. Everything we do to another person, we do to ourselves. Anything we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. Anything we do to an animal, we do to ourselves. So I think it's about reverence, which I said earlier, is that and the religion has sort of blocked reverence out and just made it into a cultural, sort of patriarchal economic tool versus an education for the soul. And any good educator of the soul would say the cornerstone of a good life is reverence and humility. And after that, courage and imagination. And those were sort of the guidelines for the prophets of ancient Israel. It was to be humble, to have courage, and to have imagination. Because whatever we can imagine or image, we can make manifest. Because that's how it works, from the immaterial to the material. And the human being is what makes things elevated through our consciousness. So when you say a prayer over a grass plot, you elevate that grass plot. When you feed your birds and you think something really pleasant for them, you make the world better for them. And so I think, unfortunately, in our country, we've been all caught up with rock stars and Hollywood stars and sports stars. And in the process, we have forgotten that each one of us is a star. Each one of us is here to illuminate the world. And each one of us is really, really, really important. And so that's why I say, self-management and trying to be of service, even if it's just prayer, and not even if. Prayer is the most powerful tool humanity has, and we don't really use it to our best advantage.
So I'm going to kind of shift gears because you brought up a point, sort of, but I want to follow this path because I think you would have some pretty interesting information. One of the things that I believe is that the ancients knew a whole lot more than we even can think about knowing now. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? And where do you think they gained this wisdom from?
Well, I think every tradition that I've studied, and I've studied many, would say that we began as spiritual beings, just units of consciousness, and slowly took on denser and denser matter. In Kabbalah, there's the tree of life, and it has these 10 balls of lights of activity that each one of us mirrors in our human anatomy: our head, our eyes, our ears, our arms, our torso, our generative organs, our legs and feet. And they would say that we are coming down, like the Vedic tradition says, we're in the age of Kali Yuga, the dark age. So we've been coming down into denser and denser and denser matter, and we're not yet, as one of my teachers would say, we're not at the bottom floor yet. Meaning in Kabbalah, you have to go all the way down the tree of life from the head to the feet before you can go back up. And I think that when the ancients, firstly, they were more spiritual beings. They weren't as densely material. They were much more in contact with the galactic universe and with space travelers and information that came from there. And, I discovered something really interesting in my studies. Up until about the 1600s, every place on Earth was designated, all sacred sites, that is, were designated in relationship to the Orion belt, which is, if you think about ancient Egypt and the three pyramids, it's the star system above them. And some think that the Alnitek star in the Orion belt is the galactic center. So for all of those millenniums, whether it was in the hills of England with the Druids, or it was the ancient Egyptians, or it was the Knights Templars, or it was the Chinese, everybody was using the same measurement for orienting their places on Earth to the skies and to the galaxy. And they were all really oriented to the galactic center. Something really peculiar happened in 1851. What began in the 1600s, in Britain, they were trying to figure out a way to designate longitude on the Earth because everybody at a different time. And what happened was we moved from using the prime, it's called a prime meridian marker, that used to be over the Giza Plateau in the Orion star system, and instead it got moved to Greenwich, England, where the Royal Observatory was established. And what happened from my vantage point is at that time period in 1851, society came unhinged from the skies. We became disengaged from the universe we are reflecting, meaning it's microcosm and macrocosm. And instead it became this political thing. The prime meridian marker then moved to Greenwich, England. That was the Royal Navy. And so it changed a lot. When we lost our relationship to the Orion star system, we really lost our sense of belonging to the universe. And then there was another big change when you think about the calendar change. It used to be that the spring was the beginning of the calendar year. And then it got moved to January by the church. So we got unhinged from nature. We got unhinged from knowing that our head in Aries in the spring is the beginning. It's where we initiate from. And instead we think it's what? Capricorn? I mean, it's a gateway of the soul, but it wasn't the beginning of the year. And so we have that one thing in the 1600s when we switched from no longer using the Orion star system as our marker all over the planet to having all our own, which was unattached to the sky. And then we lost our calendric relationship to the Earth. We went to a solar calendar and we lost our lunar timepiece. So I think when you look at things through history that way, you could begin to see how the materialistic age that we are in lost its sense of relationship to the Earth itself. So that's why we abuse it so easily. And we lost our relationship to the heavens. And that's why we don't want to admit that we've always been space travelers and we've always had relationships to the Pleiades or the Sirius star system, which native traditions still speak to. So I that's how I view it. I think that these very big institutional kind of global shifts unhinged us from the thing that really kept our heart in alignment with the universe and the Earth.
You don't think that happened much earlier? And, the insistence by the Catholic, I mean, there's the whole Catholic Church thing, which, I think everybody listening knows about that part and their level of brainwashing that happened. But I mean, I feel like they were the biggest destructive force because prior to that, different areas had their own belief systems. I mean, you hear about, during Roman times, they didn't interfere with the different religious groups and religious practice. And that was pretty much the way things were until there was, this imperialist Europe going into countries and basically land grabbing.
Yeah, and that goes with what I was saying about the calendar change. They got rid of all of the native traditions by taking traditions they had and then shifting them to make them Christian in their own calendar. So, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. And it was the church that did that. When the Gregorian calendar was created, it unhinged all the native traditions, not that they've all lost it. And that's the beauty of the indigenous peoples, the First Nations peoples all over the planet. They still maintain all these beautiful ancient traditions of healing and perception. And, they still understand all of these connections between the heaven and the earth. So I think that these are problems, but this current Pope is a fantastic shift. He's a major change agent. And I think that's an example of, sometimes a person whose karmic destiny is such that they come on the world stage at a certain point in time and they change things in ways none of us could have imagined. I mean, who could imagine a pope standing up talking about his love of all people and that the church has an obsession with gays and the church's court is the enemy of the love of God? It's phenomenal. So
it just makes you wonder if this pope is going to be, as, according to that prediction, the last one, because he brings up stuff and it makes the church just fall apart around him.
Well, I think the future of all religions is like my husband has always said, we're one people on one planet. And there will be a time period where it doesn't matter. Every human can have their own religion, their own way of practicing reverence, their own way of being humble, their own way of, elevating the nature spirits and being in harmony with them. So I don't think religion, it's not as important to me, even though I've studied Judaism very deeply, but more so for the esoteric, Kabbalistic teachings within it, which is the spiritual path in Judaism. And I think that behind every mask that has become a political institution, there is a great holy teaching. There are beautiful holy teachings in Roman Catholicism, just like there are in any other tradition. It's just a question of getting the mask of power off of it so that the divine feminine and the intuitive can come to the world stage. And that's where we're headed. Within 200 years, we will see women all over this planet being in powers of position that are so important. And everybody's intuition, the feminine aspect of the brain, will be stronger. You know, we live in such a left hemisphere culture, such a rational, divisive, separatist, masculine way of looking at the world versus the right hemisphere, which is inclusive and open and towards unity. And so the job of each culture and each parent and each school is to bring balance to the whole brain. And the whole brain path looks at everything from all vantage points to find how it's going to benefit the most people and the most in nature. You know,
it would be. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there are wonderful things happening all over the planet. We don't hear about them in America because our press is focused on the negative. It's focused on movie stars. It's focused on garbage. And it keeps everybody mindless and drugged. So it's just sort of the opiate of the masses. You know, to think that we still have a whole culture of people that idolize people running a ball down a field. Not that I'm against sports. I love it. You know, our team, the Ravens, won the Super Bowl. First time in many years I was cheering and hooping like everybody because it brought our city together. So when things bring people together, it's terrific. But the truth is our media doesn't focus on good things like biodynamic farming. It doesn't talk about holistic medicine and how many millions of people are healed through herbal traditions. You know, it doesn't focus on the fact that as we go off planet, what kinds of questions are we asking? You know, what's our purpose? Is it to mine the moon? You know, are we going to go into extraction on the moon like so many talk about, just like we've done to this earth? Or in robotics, they don't talk about the big questions in robotics and artificial intelligence. Like, why are we doing it? You know, I think it took us 100 years to destroy the soil in this country. And I think, oh my God, now they've turned the attention to our bodies with the same kind of pervasive, militaristic, acceptable risk strategy. And I think how long before they denude the human body of its soul? So, you know, our media is...
Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, because you're bringing up a really interesting point. Ooh, excuse me. I mean, because being an American, being here... You know, I mean, all right, not that I really watch the news or listen to the news all that much, you know, but what you do here is our news. And so when you are overseas, because it sounds like you have a pretty good feel for, you know, how they relay information, it sounds like the story we're getting is a far cry from the story that is being given out in other countries. You know, I mean, obviously there's going to be a certain political spin because, you know, we're great and they're not. And, you know, in their country, we suck and they're great. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I would expect that, but it sounds like it's not even close.
I think that's true. I mean, firstly, they have a much greater diversity of press. They have much more autonomy. You know, the GMO fight has been most successful in Europe. The farmers have gone to court against the corporations. They have been pioneering the organic food movement. And yet in this country, we have to fight for every good thing we want. And we have to do it ourselves. Like we have our own small little garden that we grow every spring. So we have organic food all summer. And we only shop and buy at places that offer organic foods. And that's what we've chosen to do for 30 some years or 35 years, maybe even longer, maybe 45 years now that I think about it. But in Europe, that's much more common. Homesteading is more common. I think what's happened in America is the corporation runs the news, the corporation is the news, and the corporation has hold of our Congress. And until we are able as individuals to appreciate that how we spend our dollar makes and breaks companies, that the power really is in our hands if we use it wisely. You just don't buy crap. It's just that simple. If it's not good for you, it's not good for your kids, and it's not good for your father. You know, so it's about supporting the things that are good in your community. You know, join a CSA, a community-supported agriculture, where 50 families pay a farmer before he's even planted his food or her food, so that they can have the results of his produce after it comes to fruition. And this is the way there are co-ops all over the world. I ran a food co-op all through the 70s and then the 80s. And, co-ops are a phenomenal forum for coming together. Our medical center, the Ruscombe Mansion that I founded, is a co-op. I don't own it. I don't pay anybody. Everybody's in private practice. We work together because each chooses to. So there are different models. And John Perkins, who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman, has talked about in some of the places most devastated by corporate and banking ruination, these kinds of grassroots economies are coming up. They're springing up. And it's lawful. You can do this anywhere in the world. So I think it's about taking hold of our own lives and knowing there are things we can do that can make our lives better. And when we improve our life, we've shown the next generation that they can do this too. And I think these kids coming up now are bold and strong, and they're not fooled by all the nonsense that goes on in this country when they can't make a living wage because half their wages go to taxes that the individuals never even intended to pay in this country. It was supposed to be corporations, foreign nationals doing business in this country, and American corporations overseas. That's who was supposed to pay for the federal government, in terms of taxes. So everything is kind of upside down because there's such a lack of education. But anything any one of us can do to educate somebody younger, to say a nice thing to somebody we meet in the grocery store who looks depressed, to hand somebody $1 when they're out and destitute, all of these things make a profound difference on the earth, but we're not schooled to understand how important it is, that the littlest good we do is magnified 1,000-fold.
Exactly. But you're talking about the corporations and the corporations running everything, but people run the corporations.
That's
so
right.
Where is there this giant disconnect between the people, because I believe that the bulk of the people, I'll limit this here. The bulk of the people that work for the corporation have a soul. We won't talk about the upper management. I'll let you make a comment on that.
Everybody has a soul.
Well, but is it a white soul or is it a black soul?
They may not have awareness, but they all have a soul. What I think,
but or is it because it's in this umbrella called the corporation, and is that where we're really losing the soul? Where is that disconnect happening?
It's a great question. I struggle with it all the time. Like I wrote a recent commentary, why bomb Syria? Let's bomb Monsanto. I said it tongue in cheek, but the truth is they're part of biowarfare in our agriculture fields. We're spraying 2,4-D, Agent Orange, on their genetically modified organisms. Those things we outlawed in warfare, we're spraying in our fields. So I think it's education of the heart.
Only in America.
Well, I don't know. In America, unfortunately, we have exported this poison all over the world. It was like aspartame. It causes seizures. And there was an effort by the corporation, Monsanto, I believe it was, who made that. And they tried to get it into the Indian sugar market. And there were some prince in India that refused it, and it didn't get in as the major domo in the market industry. But I think what happened was after World War II, there was all this leftover garbage from chemical weapons and all of that, and they had to find a good use for it. And so they turned it into agriculture. It also happened in World War I, but World War II exponentially much worse. And then it happened in medicine. The same strategy we use in warfare called an acceptable risk strategy. Tell me that's not cancer treatment. Let's bomb the patient to save the organ. So I think it's a lack of education of the heart. And again, it deals with the two hemispheres of the brain. The corporation is very left hemisphere. It looks for itself, its own profits, its short-term benefits. It's not looking, quote, as the right hemisphere would, the long run. How does it affect everybody? What they're looking for is the greatest gain in the shortest time span. And that is a deadly enterprise for any one of us, whether it's the way we eat or how we conduct our business with our neighbors. You have to look out for the long run, and that means little tiny incremental steps. But so it's a lack of education of the heart, I believe, and it's just a lack of people feeling connected. Everybody feels like they're their own little enterprise, and that's what this idolization of the superhero has done. It's made people feel so powerless, and that's not the truth. So everybody listening, know that you are a powerful being. You have important work to do. And no matter what anybody ever tells you, your thoughts matter. So think good things about the nature area around you. Pick up the trash you see at the stream when you're walking by. Make a difference in your life in whatever ways you can. And it doesn't have to be notable. Nobody has to know it. You know it. And if you know it, the universe knows it. Deepak Chopra, I used to interview him for decades, and one day he was trying to describe how the universal mind is something we're all part of. And he said, so the whole universe is conspiring this very moment for us to have a conversation. So too, this very moment, Rita, the whole universe is conspiring for us to have this conversation. Meaning it's all connected. It's one field. It's a unified field. And that's where we're moving. And I think once humanity bridges that gap of separatism, of thinking that just because we're in our singular bodies that we're separate from every other body. I mean, we might be home alone in our body, but we have a whole neighborhood. So I feel like that's a really big step that quantum physics is making possible for us, because they've been able to prove scientifically and mathematically what the indigenous and the ancient wisdom traditions have always taught. None of this is new. It's just being couched in a new language that maybe is more accessible to a more mechanistic thinking culture.
I mean, that part just makes me laugh all the time. It's like, all right, but you're talking about this stuff, but you could go down to the metaphysical bookstore and buy like tons of books on this topic. This is old news.
Exactly.
But it's re-educating the people that have been totally brainwashed, that have been told, oh, you can't go in the metaphysical bookstore because you're going to go to hell. But now they can learn the material because, a scientist told them that it was okay.
Exactly. But, it's about compassion, I think. I used to be so hard on everybody, and as an environmental activist, I really hated a lot of people, truthfully, until I went, here's a true story. I was working against a spray. They were going to spray in Maryland all over the state for gypsy moths. And I did the research on the product. It's called Dimilin, and it's a teratogen. It causes cancer, infertility, et cetera, et cetera. So I went to a big conference. We had managed to bring the head of the agriculture department of the state there. And he literally stood up in front of everybody and he said, this stuff is so safe. I could feed it to my children. No, not I could. I can feed it to my children. And I started crying because my heart broke open. And I realized it wasn't helpful to hate this man. He was so ignorant of what he was saying and of the product he was using. And so I think for all of us that have this love affair with the earth and this sense of loving all creatures and all humans, even if they do bad things, there's still a soul in there. It's about having compassion for their ignorance and finding a way. And I'm not always very good at it, but I'm really working on it. Finally, at the age of 60, I'm working on it to find a way. Go ahead.
But do you think that he was really ignorant or he was just giving the spin?
No, it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether he said it just to prove to us it was safe or he said it because he was ignorant. What he said was so asinine and so lethal that it made me cry because I realized Here was a person who was so ignorant, either way, knowing or unknowing, that he would say to the public forum that he'd feed this poison to his children. When I knew if he fed this poison to his children, they'd die. So,
I heard a news reporter, I almost fell out of my chair. It was right after the Fukushima thing, and they were talking about the radiation, and people were getting all concerned. And his comment, and I remember my jaw totally dropping, and then I had to call my husband up and go, you wouldn't believe what they just said on TV. They said that the amount of radiation that was released, or that we maybe would get hit with, was the same amount of radiation that a banana gives off.
Oh, my Lord.
I was like,
Lord.
Really?
Oh,
really?
Well, firstly, Harvey Wasserman has a petition going on around the world to get the UN to take over the Fukushima because it's leaking again. It's 100 feet above water. They have to take these rods out, and they don't have the capacity to do it on their own. And if that all gets into the water further than it already has, we all have problems, and all the mammals in the oceans and all the fisheries. And, these are really serious problems. I spent my life, 15 years, fighting nuclear issues in space, on the water, etc. And I think, again, from my own experience, I can't say that I won. I mean, we didn't win, but I did my best to educate people, and I did what I thought was important. And again, I think that's the bottom line, is each one of us has to choose what's important. And even if it's just helping your neighbor, go grocery shopping because they're too old to go by themselves. This is how the soul grows. And that's ultimately why, as the free-willed human on Earth, and not all planets have free will because they're already at a different level of development or a lesser development and they can't have free will, we're each to develop the idea that we are here to be of service to the world and to each other. And it doesn't matter what the service is. What matters is our intention when we do it. So if you're a cook or you clean houses or you're a scientist, it's the intention we take with it. We can't control the outcome, but we can certainly control the input. And that's our job as free-willed humans. And that's the future of human experience. The future is being shaped right now by every one of us, by the things we think, say, and do, just as our individual lives are being shaped by the things we think, say, and do. But we are a collective think, say, and doers. So together, if we really, put out the good and have some faith that there is a divine plan that we can't always see the timeline of, and the timeline's not as important, that we do our little part while we're building this magnificent planetary experience, because there will be other souls coming. And it's going to be a rough ride for a while. So while it's rough riding, let's make it a little easier for each other and the earth and all living things by doing our best to support life.
Well, it does sound like you feel that at some point in time on our journey or in this journey on this road that we might actually find some balance here.
I do believe that. My study of Kabbalah, I quit radio and broadcasting and news, and I spent 10 years in a lot of silence. And after studying the prophecies of the ancient prophets and Kabbalah, etc., I do believe we will have 1,000 years of peace, and then I think we'll start ascending out of our bodies, where we won't need a physical body. We'll be consciousness units, and maybe Earth will be our spaceship. I don't know, and it's not so important. What matters is civilizations rise and fall all the time throughout the millennium. And we're on a journey right now about deciding, do we want to save the earth and all life on it, or do we want to continue to destroy it? And I, for one, want to save it. And I want to see an opportunity for my children and grandchildren. And I want to know that they're going to have the same free will delight that I've had playing in nature and having dogs and drinking water out of the stream that I once did as a child. So I know it sounds crazy to believe that this is possible, but if I don't believe it, then I lose hope. And we have to have hope. And that's why I love Gandhi's statement that whenever he lost hope about all the criminals and tyrants that have always been in the world, he said love and compassion always wins in the end. And I believe it's true.
And it is. Oh, I just looked at the clock. We have 1 minute. So if people want to get a copy of your book, where should they go?
The Future of Human Experience is published by Inner Traditions Destiny Books, and you can also go to my website, www.zohara, Zohara, online.com.
Can they order it through your website? See, I always like to let people know if they can get autographed copies. So can they order it through your website?
Absolutely. www.zohara, Zohara, online.com. And also at 21st21st, centuryradio.com, which is the show my husband and I co-host, and there's tons of stuff in there. 21st21st, centuryradio.com.
So you guys are still doing your show?
We are.
So when is that on?
It airs locally Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. on WCBM 680 AM and online all over the world.
Well, see, then we're not conflicting air times. That's always good.
How thankful we are.
Well, Zohara, thank you so much for coming on to the show, and I look forward to having you back on again.
Rita, it was a pleasure. Really.
All right.
So much.
Thank you. That's Zohara Hieronimus. Her book is The Future of Human Experience. That would be Bitsy saying goodbye. Her website is zoharaonline.com. Bitsy, just hush, hush. I'm almost done. And next week...
3 dogs in the studio.
Well, this is her new thing. I get ready to say goodbye, and she's just like, bye, everybody.
Exactly.
Bye.
She wants to be part of it. Bye, Bitsy.
Next week, we have Jack Churchwood, the great-grandson of James Churchwood, who wrote the books The Lost Continent of Mu, which is very cool. And in the second hour, Barry Brailsford talking about In Search of the Southern Serpent. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.